The title of facilitator is something that I very much wear proudly, but at the time I felt like an imposter, as we all do at different times, and have had to grow into that title in some ways. And actually, my last day in this corporate job was my very first conversation with my now wife. And so I had to let her know, as long as you're okay with me walking away from a perfectly stable corporate job with benefits and a paycheck, we may have a relationship. My regret is how long it took me, roughly 10 years, to get to a point where I can see so clearly that my value goes beyond the doing.
Founder to founder, real talk, real stories. One decision that changed everything. This is the best decision ever. Hey, welcome back to the best decision ever. I am here with a longtime friend of mine, Erich Kurschat. Erich, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
All right, Erich, why don't you give us the 60-second rundown of who you are and what you do?
All right, never an easy feat, and I promise this isn't rehearsed. So I am, first and foremost, a father. I mean, that's kind of improvisatory there. I that's important to me, so I want to lead with that. I'm a husband. I'm also a father of 3 young girls, and that's keeping me on my toes, to say the least, these days. Professionally, I am the owner of Harmony Insights, LLC. I help companies establish everything DISC as a shared language within their organizations, help their teams communicate and collaborate more effectively. I've been doing that for 20 years, and my wife is like, really, Erich, 20 years? Still excited about it. I am also the founder of the HR Hot Seat Inclusive Mastermind community. So we bring together HR professionals of all shapes and sizes to tackle common challenges in a mastermind style format. We're going on 10 years. Everything we do is free, and really proud to be building community among HR professionals, some of whom need DISC along the way. Let's be clear, everybody needs DISC, but only some of whom will engage me, but many of whom show up with different needs, and I do whatever I can to help meet those needs.
I love that. And DISC is is it a personality assessment? Is it a strengths assessment? How would you define that?
I would probably call it a behavioral assessment. It's one of the more popular workplace assessments. So when you're thinking about the tendencies and preferences that individuals bring to the workplace, how they connect with others, how they do their best work, DISC is a fantastic common language for having that conversation.
So important. If you're building a team, if you're building anything, you need to make sure that we know how what we're saying is being received by the people on the other end. And I've been truly accused of being a high D. A friend of mine is big into DISC, and he's like, "Oh, you're a high D," and he says it as almost as an accusation, but it's a good thing, right?
It's always a good thing. There's no good or bad with DISC. So, yeah. I mean, if you want, we can spend our time diving into your DISC style. But my guess is you have other questions for me.
I do, and my number one question is: let's get right down to it. What's the best decision you've ever made?
I love it. It is starting my business to begin with.
So what did you do? So let's take us back, because starting a business is no small feat. Most of the people who listen to this show are themselves starters in some form or fashion. Take us back to where you were and what you did before you started the business.
The days of when I first met Bryce Conlon.
That's right. I wasn't going to tip the hat, but yeah.
So I was working for a pretty prominent restaurant company, food service company, and headquartered in Chicago, in the corporate office, or the home office, as we said. And I was an HR generalist, a job I landed in outside of college because I got a temp job there as an HR assistant and decided to stick around for 16 years.
No way.
Loved it. Really learned HR through the lens of food service hospitality. I mean, it seemed like it was a great fit, great leadership. I mean, I really bought into everything the company stood for, and just no matter where I was in the country, we got some pretty great perks in terms of food and sports. And along the way, learned about this thing called the DISC assessment. And I had been a psychology major and a philosophy minor in college, was good at thinking and considering why other people do what they do, endlessly fascinated by other people. But I was also an introvert. And so that meant that I could think all day about things, but, put me in a position to facilitate conversations with groups, and I got a little nervous about that. Was given an opportunity to begin facilitating DISC at this company for our internal folks, and just fell in love with it. I mean, nervous every time I got in the spotlight, but was like, there is something to this model that I think I need to explore outside of the organization. And we can dive into it, but that came along with all sorts of hesitation.
Yeah, and we will dive into it. But I just wanted to say, it's interesting to hear you say this, because that is the company where we met, and I always knew you as a facilitator. That's the role that I sort of, you entered my world or I entered yours in, where you were always standing up in front of a group of people. And so to hear that was nerve-wracking, that was new and hard, that's surprising to me. I did not know that about you.
It underscores, I think, the importance of not assuming things about people just given the context in which you see them.
Yeah.
It was really, and continues to be, something that causes me to adapt what comes naturally to me on a regular basis. I've chosen a line of work, and at that time was discovering a potential line of work that was at great odds with who I feel like I am internally, at least in terms of my social wiring, and other sorts of wiring. And now the title of facilitator is something that I very much wear proudly. But at the time, I felt like an imposter, as we all do at different times. And I've had to grow into that title in some ways.
How does imposter syndrome show up for you when you're feeling that feeling?
Yeah. I struggle with the term imposter syndrome. I recognize what it means and how people engage with it. And I feel like for so many of us, it is a necessary step in the process. You go from not knowing the thing to knowing the thing, or not doing the thing to doing the thing. And that there's an in-between there. And I feel like that's the part in which you're not really sure that you're cut out for it, or that you should use the title that you've chosen, or that you should be doing the work that you've chosen. I've learned to take it as sort of part of the process, but in the moment it feels like, what right do I have to be calling myself a facilitator or a business owner or an entrepreneur? And I'd imagine for a lot of people, that voice is loud enough that it keeps them from doing the thing that they most want to do, or that even society would say you should most be doing. And fortunately for me, I guess, I danced with that long enough that I don't want to say that I completely shook it off, but I've gotten to a place now where I'm not seeing it so much as feeling like an imposter as I am recognizing that it is simply part of the journey of getting from less confident to more confident.
Interesting. So speaking of confidence, so you're working in-house, you're part of an HR team. Mm-hmm. You discover DISC, you start kind of experimenting with it, flexing it, in the confines of a very safe, very good corporate environment. Like, that's my only corporate experience. And I hear a lot of people complain about it. I'm like, I don't know, like mine was all right. Like, it wasn't so bad.
Right.
What started to shift for you that you wanted to step outside or stretch outside of the confines of a safe, stable career?
I think part of it was not being entirely clear myself on what more I would want to do should I remain in that corporate HR role. And there are titles that I hadn't yet achieved, and certain responsibilities that I had not yet taken on. So to be clear, this is not that anybody was keeping me from advancing beyond where I was at the time. But I had been promoted 5 or so times and was just feeling this itch to experience life outside of that corporate structure. And to be specific, life in self-employment. and even as those words come out of my mouth, I'm thinking, why would anybody be curious to experience self-employment. Like, it comes along with its fair share of stressors, but there was something about me that was like, I love this one thing that I'm doing so much, that being disc, facilitation. What could it look like in a different context that was absent some of these securities and stabilities, I suppose, that I've come to, I don't want to say take for granted, but really count on in some ways.
So was there a moment for you when you were like, I'm going to go start a thing? Or was it more gradual? Was it more kind of just a feeling that built over time? Like, how did that come about for you? Because it's one thing to get curious. It's another to sort of decide.
Yes. I'm going to blame the series of podcasts that I was listening to at the time, just about sort of professional development and entrepreneurial this and that. And these podcasters whom I admired greatly started planting these ideas in my head, that I could be entrepreneurial and I could kind of chart my own course. And the more I was learning about this sense of intrapreneurism, I think I recognized that I was doing some of that in my corporate role, that I was building community and that I was acting on ideas that I had, few and far between, though they may have seemed at times, because I can be pretty sort of regimented about things and structured. And I recognized the extent to which some of the stuff that I was doing, I could do on my own, and I could market differently if I chose to. And I could figure out how to price them and productize, if that's a word, I think it is, some of that stuff, and do it in a way that just felt new and different. And when Erich gets to a point where he wants to do things new and different, it's probably well past the time to pursue those things, given how I am with routine and structure and that. And so I think it was the sense that I started to recognize that I could be doing what I was doing in a different capacity. And I really wanted to experience what stepping outside of my comfort zone was really going to feel like, rather than fear it for the rest of my life.
So I'd love to explore that a little bit more, right? Because for many of us, when we start the adventure, it's a cocktail of emotions that ebb and flow. What were kind of the things that were exciting you? And then part B of that, what were the things that were holding you back or causing you to pause?
Yeah. I think a part of what excited me was I had really identified, I had learned so much about HR as a whole and knew I wasn't going to get far from the HR profession, and I haven't. I'm working this week to put together an HR event that I'm very much committed to this Thursday evening, building community. But of all of the things that I did, I recognized that there was this one thing that I was really passionate about. And for the longest time, I couldn't distinguish, or I didn't distinguish between what I was good at and what I was truly passionate about. And I think it's easy to confuse the two. I was good at things that didn't necessarily excite me for so long. And suddenly there's this thing that I seem to be good at that I also really, really enjoyed doing. So the draw was the freedom to do more of that and to do it in ways that were entrepreneurial, that were revenue generating. I mean, things that I never had to consider before because I had a salary and, a certain budget to play with, and it was all kind of set in stone. So there was this lure, I suppose, of entrepreneurism and business ownership. And there is a difference between the two, I think. Yet at the same time, I'm thinking, okay. And actually, my last day in this corporate job was my very first conversation with my now wife. And so I had to let her know, as long as you're okay with me walking away from a perfectly stable corporate job with benefits and a paycheck, we may have a relationship. And luckily we did, and she was okay with it. I knew I was trading in that perceived, and that's an important word, perceived stability. That the paycheck that I was enjoying at the time, the benefits, honestly, for me, even the direction. To this day, I think I'm a really good number two. And suddenly I had to be a number one and make my own decisions and think strategically about things. And so I was a little apprehensive about trading in those benefits, that direction, and the sense that I really was safe in that corporate role. Whether or not I truly was, who knows? If you hit rewind and I stayed there for some additional amount of time, who knows what could have happened? But I felt like it was safe, and I felt like I was stepping into something that was very uncertain and unpredictable. And for some reason, I decided to do it anyway.
Well, I want to double down on that idea of the perceived safety of a corporate stable paycheck. What do you mean by that?
I think that's where people's minds go very quickly when they're employed in a more traditional sense. I have a paycheck, I have benefits, and I get them week after week. What they're saying is, I have until now, right? I've gotten those things until now. But what I think is quickly discounted is a merger or an acquisition, a global pandemic, fill in the blank, where on a dime, things can change and your scenario can change. And suddenly you're without that stability that you thought was so, very much a given, I suppose. And so as I've done the career coaching that I've worked with HR professionals and others, that's part of what comes up when they express a hesitance to step away from something more corporate or traditional and do their own thing. It's to help them redefine what truly is stable, and why do you perceive it that way? Is it just because you've gotten the paycheck until today? Who knows what could happen till tomorrow, And if you have some agency here, let's talk about how you could maybe step outside of that comfort zone into something that you see as less stable, but still have it be a fairly informed decision.
I'd like to step back to that moment of informed decision for you. It's one thing to have the idea, the inclination to say, I'm going to go and start something. How did you go about deciding, okay, now it's time to take action and I'm going to?
The way I decided to do it was not simply to jump ship and cut ties. I felt like that would not be advantageous to me. I wanted to get a sense of how it felt. And I remember a podcaster at the time saying, if you feel like that transition is in your future, a couple ways to go about it. One, you just jump ship, make a clear transition because you have a good amount in the bank and you're confident that you can sort of get by for a certain amount of time until you're building revenue. The other argument was that you do it on the side. And I don't know that side hustle necessarily was the terminology used, but that you maintain that perceived stability while you're spending time on the side building this passion project of yours. And so I decided to go that route. And it took on a few clients, all on the up and up. I mean, I spoke very, very candidly with my boss at the time and had her blessing, and I'm forever grateful for that. As long as, of course, it didn't, interfere with my work otherwise. And I took on some clients, and I said, I need to experience this. I need to experience something beyond just kind of stepping into a facilitation with a slide deck, and experience, like, what is business development? What does marketing look like? How do I use social media? Why don't I have a LinkedIn account yet? Like, I probably do need to be on LinkedIn. And start to practice the aspects of small business ownership that I had not yet experienced, to get a true sense of. Now, you could talk with, and I'm sure you've already talked with other people that have a higher risk tolerance than yours truly, that say, hey, you know what? I didn't know what steps 2 through 10 were, but I knew I needed to take step 1. I'm somebody who likes to have some sense of what at least steps 2, 3, and 4 are before I take step 1, and doing this on the side was a way that I could experience that without yet, divorcing myself from this job that I really did enjoy, the corporate job. So
as you stepped into that new environment, right, you're starting to experience entrepreneurship, right, in a very real way, where if you don't make the call, there is no contract. If you don't follow up, there is no contact, right? How was that a surprising experience? Was it alarming? Was it exactly what you thought it would be as you got into it, as you started to, put the waders on and walk into the water? Or was it unexpected?
It was exciting for me and expected in the sense that I just loved disc. I sort of had this product that in service that I was really genuinely excited about. Now, had I been stepping away from corporate America to, I don't know why I always come back to this, but like run a bowling alley, opening, I would have been like, just sort of so-so about it, like not nearly as excited. Anyway, with DISC, I was particularly excited, and so like I was that excitement was there, the attraction was there, and that was something I did anticipate. What I didn't necessarily anticipate was maybe how challenging it might be for me as a self-proclaimed introvert to do some of that, to do some of the business development, to embrace the self-promotion. I remember going for a run with Brian Tracy's The Psychology of Selling in my earphones. And he's talking about like 130 ways to close a deal. And I'm like, Brian, if I could just have 3, like give me 3 ways to close a deal, and in part that was, I think, due to my own wiring, and sort of how I envisioned how I might approach some of these conversations, but also like being so clear about how my natural tendencies and preferences, that if I have too many barriers, something likely is not going to happen. If I can envision all of the different ways that this could go wrong and really envision them clearly, I may not take that first step. And so it was, yes, I was drawn to DISC and I was excited about the thing, but I also was like, oh, wait a minute, there's more to this than I might have anticipated. And I really have to be intentional about how I navigate those perceived barriers, because if I'm not intentional about it, they may become so insurmountable that I don't do this. At all. I don't move forward. Yeah.
I'm going to deviate from my kind of the current line of questioning to just ask, what is it about DISC? Because there's Myers-Briggs, there's Colby, there's Gallup Strengths Finders. There's a million different tools out there that you can use for inputs on team development and figuring out how you fit and how your colleagues fit. What is it about DISC that resonates so strongly with you?
I love the question, and the fact that you could list off the ones you did so readily tells me either you've done your prep work for this conversation or you've taken a few assessments in your
I'm a nerd. I am a nerd when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. There are so many out there, and I'll be the first to say there's no one size fits all. They all serve a different purpose, right? So there's space for all of them. I think what it comes down to me is a few different things. One, and probably primarily, DISC, and everything DISC in particular is the brand that I work with, is so accessible. So when I'm working with an individual or team, I don't want to put something in front of them that like they need someone to help them interpret it, or like a coach, a business coach, or a professional career coach, or even an advanced degree of some sort. I want them to be able to look through the output and be like, I get this. And I see myself in it, Yeah. And so I guess that's part 2 for me, is that and this is important to me and to some companies, like it's valid and reliable, at least the brand of DISC that I use, as a scientific tool. If you'd prefer to go on Facebook and figure out which Friends character you are, and like that's, the foundation of a productive conversation at work, then you have my blessing. But if you want something that's kind of based in science, that's a different matter. And then lastly, I would say you've mentioned a couple that kind of paint a picture that you are who you are across conversations and environments and relationships. And I think while there are certainly aspects of your personality and your behavior that are consistent across those things, what I love about DISC is it reminds us that we have agency, that in any moment, regardless of what comes naturally to us, we can build this muscle of being able to adapt and choose a communication style or a behavior that's going to be beneficial, not in the name of manipulating people, to be absolutely clear. None of this is about manipulation, but to connect meaningfully and productively and communicate with respect.
Love that. Well put. Okay. Talk to me a little bit about your introversion, right? Because you're sitting here today. There's a lot of, I think, people who have an idea of what it means to be an introvert. And it usually doesn't involve starting a business.
No, not typically.
How do you reckon with that
Yeah.
part of who you are in the context of stepping out and trying something bigger?
I will say, kind of in answering that question, that I do a lot of public speaking, and one of my most popular sessions is called Network Like an Introvert. And I think it's because introverts themselves want to understand themselves better and want to feel as though they're not broken in some way, which I think society leads us to believe we are. And also extroverts who say, I have no idea what language these introverted friends of mine are speaking, and I need to better understand it so I can connect, right? So you're getting both sides of that coin that show up for it. For me, it was a recognition from early on, and it's interesting to see this show up in our own children, that there were certain ways that I responded to my environment and to people and to social situations and to energy. I think the most common definition of introversion is introverts get their energy from being alone and extroverts get their energy from other people. And I've long taken issue with that issue because I think the implication there is that introverts are antisocial and we don't want to be in relationships. We can't connect, with others, or don't want to. And I don't think anything could be farther from the truth. What I've enjoyed and embraced is a theory that I read about in Atomic Habits. I think James Clear, yeah. James Clear, the author there, and I've heard it talked about by Adam Grant and Susan Cain, is this idea that it's less about how we get our energy and more about how we respond to stimulation in our environment. I don't think you hear people talking about this as much.
Tell me more about that. So what do you mean how we respond to stimulation in our environment? What do you mean by that?
So as simply as I can put it, in Atomic Habits, James Clear talked about, even in a nursery, after babies are born, if an unexpected sound is played, those babies who turn toward it, they're attracted to that sound, later in life often identify as extroverts. Wow. And the babies who turn away from this unexpected sound, like are put off by it in some way, often later in life identify as introverts. And that definition really resonated with me. And here's the example that I typically use. If I walk into a crowded room, a noisy room, a cacophonous room, and Bryce Conlon is standing there, and I want very much to catch up with Bryce. Number one, I want very much to catch up with you. I want that interaction. I want that one-on-one time. I want deep conversation. I'm not going to let you go after 3 minutes. Like, we're going to get into it, right? But I don't want to have that conversation in a noisy, crowded room. I'm overwhelmed by that stimulation. I'm going to say, Bryce, I'm so glad to see you here. Could we step outside? Like, I think I saw a balcony, or can we go around the corner? And then we'll get into it. We'll have that conversation. I don't want any less to connect with you. I don't feel any less able, to connect with you. I just know about myself that I need to do it in a way that is truer to what's going to be conducive to a really good conversation.
So as an introvert in business, obviously, business runs on relationship. It's the quality of the people that you're around, is how you're showing up for them. Sort of de facto, you're in conversation with individuals, prospects, clients, etc. How do you engineer your environment so that it works with your bend, your natural bend, as an introvert in business?
Engineer is such an important word, though, and for some people that may be off-putting. They don't want anything that's engineered, or at least overly engineered. But what I think sort of the implication there is, how am I, not to put words in your mouth, but how am I intentional about those interactions, right?
Exactly.
And I think that word intentional is so important. And maybe that means engineering things in a certain way. I, number one, need to recognize about myself, and I'm not speaking for all introverts, but about myself, that I have only saved up a certain amount of energy for a given conversation or facilitation or activity. And that once my tank is kind of depleted in terms of that energy, now I may be inspired like nobody's business by the conversation, but it may get to a point where I'm just less myself. That I just don't feel like I have much more to give. If I'm not realistic about where that line in the sand is, I'm doing myself and you a disservice by moving beyond it. So number one is being realistic about the energy that I have, so for example, if I'm going to speak on stage and come off stage and anticipate a line of people who want to, just say hello and meet me, etc., is that ideal for me? Is there a way that instead of, meeting with a line of people, I can in advance get a sense of who's going to be there and set up time to speak with them one-on-one to really give them my full attention? Is there a way, instead of just giving people like open access to my calendar where who knows who is going to show up out of the blue, can I organize, and yes I can, or engineer Calendly in a way that I have full control over who I'm speaking with and when? So for example, I batch all my calls on Fridays. I know then Monday through Thursday are free to spend in other ways, and that those really inspiring, sort of actionable conversations that I'm inviting into my calendar are taking place on Friday. So I wake up Friday morning and I can have reserved the right amount of energy to get through those conversations. The list goes on, but those are just a couple of examples of ways that I can be more intentional about those interactions.
Really good. Yeah. Engineer intention. That's the same idea. Is it's structuring your life, your calendar, your time in a way that fuels you in the work that you're doing rather than drains you endlessly.
Yeah.
And so, like you answered that question spot on. So, all right. So back to the main narrative here. So you fall in love with disc, you decide, okay, I'm going to try my hand at this. I'm going to do it, kind of moonlight, do the side hustle thing while I find my footing. How did you get to the point where you said, okay, it's time. I gotta cut the cord and just go on my own? How did you get there?
Yeah. I would say that was probably one of the hardest decisions of this entire journey. And to be completely honest and vulnerable with you, I'm not sure that I did it right. I've never really talked about this before, but I think in my excitement to transition from a corporate job to my own thing, I did it hastily. That I didn't, it wasn't as thoughtful as it could have been. I was so excited to experience this new thing that I was already experiencing kind of in my mind, and a little bit on the side in real life. But I was like, okay, I know that once Erich has gotten to this point, if I don't make this transition, it may never happen. So I got to make it now. And so given where I was in the fiscal year and all of that, just in my own responsibilities, being able to do it sooner rather than later was beneficial to me. And so I remember making that decision and being excited about it. To be clear, I don't think I was aware in the moment that it was hasty, but I can't tell you how many times since I thought, if I had this to do over again with the sort of the wisdom and the experience that I would bring to it now, it would look a lot different. And in looking different, I think it would communicate respect for my employer at the time differently, my boss, my supervisor at the time, my colleagues, people who I guess may have been left wondering, like, what happened? Like that happened quickly. For someone who's been around for 16 years, like, why did he seem so eager to leave? And the to be clear, I wasn't running away from anything. I wasn't eager to leave this corporate job that I loved so much. I was kind of running towards something that held such promise and intrigue. And, as I've talked with others along the way, small business owners, et cetera, I feel like everybody has had some experience like that, where they have this transition that they're facing and they're so like wrapped up in the nuts and bolts of the transition and what's exciting on the other end or what's stressful on this end, that it's not until afterwards that they look back on it and say, you know what, I could probably have done that a little differently.
Sure. Well, you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, when you're in it, it's how we learn the lessons usually is by getting it wrong and reflecting on it and then deciding to adjust moving forward rather than repeat the lessons. So don't beat yourself up too hard on it. How long ago was this that
So this
you
was
made all these?
2015
2015.
was the transition.
So
Yeah,
it's
and
like
to be
11
clear,
years
maybe
ago.
even more
Wow.
direct about what you asked before. It's just I had gotten the experience under my belt and had a sense of kind of what my initial clientele might look like. It had really taken form in a way that was beyond just, I'm going to try this on the side. I had some sense of kind of certainty that came along with it. And then the timing in the year, et cetera, everything else kind of fell into place. But yeah, that was 2015. And honestly, I'm not sure that I'm wired to be self-employed. We started out by talking about that. I really do think I'm a good number two, but I have been able to do some of the most rewarding, fulfilling work I've ever done in the past 10 or 11 years. And I wouldn't trade that for the world.
I'm going to ask you a real question here. You may have touched on it already, and maybe you haven't. In the last 11 years, any regrets?
Let me think about this. So nothing immediately comes to mind. I can think about all of the things that I'm glad that I do, have done, the things that I'm grateful for, the small wins and the large wins along the way. Perhaps if I were to have to identify a regret, it is, and maybe this is part and parcel to how I moved into what I'm doing. I feel like you talk with a number of people who were doers, and then they're managing the doing, or they're doing business development for the doing, or they're supervising other people who are doing the doing, right? And I was so caught up in the doing, even in my own business. And this is the difference between, I think, small business ownership and entrepreneurism. There's a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber that you may have read.
Great book.
That talks about this in sort of fable form. I, at one point, was sort of like a corporate trainer. And then so I built a business around being a corporate trainer. And so I was in this mindset, this almost myopic mindset of, this is what will sustain me. It is doing what I had done in a corporate role. But of course, I'm no longer in that corporate role. And so to remain so steadfast and so focused on that all revenue would come from facilitating disc workshops, because that's what I had always done. And that was my strength, was facilitating disc workshops. My regret, and I knew I'd get around to it. My regret is how long it took me, roughly 10 years, to get to a point where I can see so clearly that my value goes beyond the doing. My value moves in the direction of supporting others who are doing the doing, getting out of my own way and delegating some things I've not delegated. Just stepping beyond disc in many ways and saying, hey, I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but it's worth seeing. It's worth kind of sticking around for it. Being open to, I've heard a lot of people say, entrepreneurs say, like, just jump and the net will appear. And I never wanted to jump without the net. That's me, I never wanted to jump without the net. You recognize that I may not see what's coming, but I can have faith that it's going to be beneficial. It's going to help me put good into the world. It's going to allow me to grow in some way. It's going to push me further outside of my comfort zone, which can be very beneficial. But how do you regret risk tolerance? I don't know. I don't have a formula for that, but that maybe that's what I boil it down to. I regret those things that have taken longer to come my way or to be embraced by me because of how risk averse I've been along the way.
I can identify with a lot of that. Just on a personal note, I was always kind of a late bloomer. And so even in my own life and business, when I look back, I'm like, man, seems like coulda, woulda, shoulda learned that lesson a lot faster than I did,
Yeah.
So I get that.
Well, if you don't mind me adding this, and I feel like so often you hear in interviews, and you didn't ask this, but like, if you could go back and tell and maybe this is coming, but if you could go back and tell your younger self, I mean, there's all kinds of things that I would tell my younger self, and that I'm sure you would as well. But like, I think ultimately you can only take the path that you've taken. You know, like that's usually what the response is. Like, I wouldn't change a thing. Not only would I not, but I don't think you can. I think you can only get to wherever you get in life by experiencing everything you've experienced along the way. And that's the pitfalls, and that's the dragging your feet on stuff, and it's the risk tolerance and everything we've talked about. So I can have regrets, and I can, you know, have advice for my younger self, but just if you put me back in that place in 2015, I probably would want to do things exactly the same way, because it's the only path. It's the only way that I've gotten to where I am now.
Love that. Love it. So if people are listening, right, appreciate you showing up, being honest, being real. Hopefully to the listeners out there, you're getting a sense for who Erich is and what he's about and how he would show up as an asset in your business to help you better understand your people so you can maximize their output, their performance, the culture of your organization. If people want to find more about you, Erich, if they want to learn more about what you do and how you do it, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
I appreciate the question. I spend altogether too much time on LinkedIn now, going from someone who didn't even have a LinkedIn profile to where I am now. That's always a great place to start. Of course, I have harmonyinsights.com for the disc, and I'm also an authorized partner for the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And then anything related to HR community is at hrhotseat.com. But, you know, and this is funny given our conversation about the introversion, if you find me on LinkedIn, odds are I'm going to want to have a conversation with you, and we're going to schedule time, probably on a Friday, to have a conversation where I can really get to know you in your interests in life in general, but certainly anything that we share. I will end by saying, I suppose, that anybody who has an affinity for DISC on any level, whether you think it might be beneficial to your organization, you want to build a business around it, you heard your second cousin twice removed talk about it once, I'm in for it. I'm a true DISC nerd and would love to have a conversation.
All right, Erich, thanks for showing up and being real.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Do you know a founder who should be on this show? Send them this episode and encourage them to apply.